Trauma bonding, love bombing, and narcissistic abuse, they all go hand in hand. We're going to be talking about that and how to understand trauma bonding and how we can fall prey into the trauma bond based on the connection of narcissistic abuse that is provided from love bombing. Hey there friends, Ashley Berges today, and today I want to talk about narcissistic abuse and how narcissistic abuse with the use of love bombing creates a trauma bond. Much like the Stockholm Syndrome, and I know that many of you have probably researched the Stockholm Syndrome and you know that there was a case back in the 70s where people were held captive, and these people that were held captive actually ended up having feelings and trust and even affection for the folks who captured them and held them against their will. Obviously, in those situations, we realize that we become quite dependent, and we also figure out about compliance because we know that this person is holding us against our will, right? And we want to make them happy so that we get food and water and that sort of thing, and they don't kill you. But at the same time, you begin to look at these little morsels of goodness, aka able to eat, able to drink, and you end up turning that around in your own mind and creating this emotional bond, right? And so, much like the Stockholm Syndrome is trauma bonding. We're going to talk about that because instead of the Stockholm Syndrome where you're being held captive, there's a use of love bombing, and that use of love bombing actually helps to create that trauma bond in this narcissistic abuse. By the way, we've recently done 3 different videos on love bombing. We've discussed it in 3 previous videos, and all the links to all 3 of those videos are in the description below. So to really get an understanding of love bombing, you'll want to watch at least 1, 2, or all 3 of those videos to really understand if you're dealing with the situation where you are being love bombed or a friend or family member is as well. So, love bombing, real quick, just to give the quick 20,000 foot overview, is an attempt to influence a person by demonstrations of attention and affection, right? And it's a possible cycle of abuse used by narcissists more often than not to manipulate and to control you. Okay, so it's psychological manipulation, so that's the forefront. And how it works is there's this concept of idealization, right? And I like to call it the pedestal formation. So the manipulator puts the other person on a pedestal and idolizes them and showers them with love and affection and gifts and what have you. And the other person that's getting all this affection has never felt that before. So it's like amazing. It gets very addictive because many of us don't get that attention, right? We haven't had it. We've never experienced that. And we begin to feel like, oh my God, this is the love I've always dreamed of. This is the stuff that's in the movies. This is really the most amazing relationship I've ever been in. And that can get very addictive, right? And we believe that this is real. And all of a sudden, things change. So the idolization's there, and then all of a sudden, there's this pattern and cycle of devaluation, right? Where the other person begins to devalue you, making you feel bad, making you question yourself, right? Making you question your value. And you start feeling bad because you're thinking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I was up here, getting all this love and support and all this stuff that I dreamed of, but now I'm not. And so I must have done something really, really wrong. I must have hurt this person. I must have done something bad. And I need to figure out how to not do that anymore so that I get back to where I want to go, right? Okay, so we start creating that mindset within our own mind, right? And the abuser, the person that's using the love bombing, they're going right along with that, correct? And so then what happens is eventually there's a discard phase, right? Where you're over there worried sick, feeling horrible, feeling sad, feeling that you've lost the love of your life and you can't believe that you've done something bonehead to make this happen, right? Well, then guess what else happens? The cycle repeats. You get to go back into the idolization, the pedestal phase, and you're like, oh, wow. Okay, almost thought I lost the love of my life. Almost did, but guess what? I saved it the last hour. Okay, what happens after that? You're getting the point. Devaluation, discard, right? Rinse and repeat. And when you have to go through those types of cycles for so long, you begin to question your reality. Something wrong with me. I just got to make sure this person's happy. I can't let them go away. It'll be the loss of everything that I've ever had in my life that mattered. Okay? So you can begin to question your actual validity. And the other person that's abusing you allows you to do that questioning because guess what? You become hyper dependent on them and you become really compliant to what they want you to do, right? Much like, well, the Stockholm Syndrome. So first off, we understand that the ups and downs of love bombing is extremely addictive because we're trying to get back up on that top, right? We're trying to figure out how to get back to having that affection, that love, that admiration that felt really good. Love bombing in and of itself is full-on addictive, okay? And the reason why it is addictive is that we really liked feeling that certain way and we want to get back there. So we'll do whatever it takes to get there, right? And so you got to think about that when we're in this type of cycle. The drama is addictive, the actual way that it's being created and played is addicted. And that's what's very interesting because we become very dependent on that and we don't realize that we're losing our identity. So let's talk about trauma bonds. Trauma bonds are actually strengthened by sporadic reinforcement, right? So that sporadic reinforcement of the periodic love bombing, right? Coupled with false promises, right? They're telling us what they're going to do. It never comes to fruition, but at the time it sounds really good, right? Those small crumbs of kindness that we see as validation, right? Those false hopes that are thrown out by the manipulator to keep us bonded into the relationship. But it's not just the manipulator that's throwing this stuff out. It's also our own mind, keeping us in the relationship, wanting to believe that this is going to work out, right? And all of this at the same time is coupled up with our own abandonment wounds that we're dealing with and the issues and the fear that this other person is going to ultimately leave us. So the love of our life is going to ultimately leave us because we believe this, right? So there's so many things coupled together to create a trauma bond. And that's why it's so hard to break loose from a trauma bond, right? It's not like it's a loose string attached. It's like tethered to you with all of these different aspects. And that's why it becomes so challenging, because even when you're not getting those validation crumbs and you're going through the downturn, because you're not even thinking about yourself anymore and you're so engrossed in this relationship and engrossed in the other person, you lose sight of your reality, right? That keeps you in the turmoil and what I like to call the blender of emotions. So let's talk about 4 things that I want you to know about trauma bonds, so this can really help you to understand what a trauma bond is and how to identify it if you're going through it right now, okay? So let's begin. The first indication of a trauma bond is that the sadness and the feeling of loss and loneliness is overwhelmingly horrible, okay? So right when you're ready to leave, like you're thinking, okay, there's something wrong. It seems like there's a cycle and a pattern here. I feel like there's a little bit of abuse and that I don't deserve it. Right then, I like to say, here comes the crumbs, okay? Because your abuser, the manipulator, is going to give you crumbs of validation, doing small things that are nice, that pulls you right back in. And you start questioning and thinking, you know what? This is the time. This is the time we're going to live happily ever after. It's going to work. This is perfect. And this is the first indication of a trauma bond. The second indication that you're dealing with a trauma bond, love bombing, and narcissistic abuse is that you've been in the proverbial kitchen so long that you don't realize how hot it has become, okay? You're doing absolutely everything you can for them, and not once at all are you thinking about how you feel or thinking about yourself. So you're basically emotionally bleeding to death trying to stay in this relationship. And you don't see how dysfunctional and how manipulative it is. And that's the thing, is that a lot of times in these trauma bonds with the love bombing, we get separated from family and friends, right? Much like the Stockholm Syndrome, where you're separated, you're kind of sequestered, and you begin to believe everything that that person's telling you. And you also get fearful because you get desperate, right? And so you begin to be like feeling exactly and wanting to know exactly how they're feeling, and it becomes that their feelings kind of become yours because you lose that identity. The next indication that you're dealing with a trauma bond is that you're addicted to the relationship. You're addicted to it, and you're addicted to the relationship so much that you are in self-destruction mode. Okay, and I want you to think about that, because when we get addicted to a relationship, especially in this type of toxicity, you are not seeing reality. Okay, there is no reality. You've been conditioned to believe that if you lose this person, if they leave you, it's the absolute end of the world. Okay, and so you're really believing this, and in this process, in this addiction, you have lost sight of everything. It's just like a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, correct? When we get addicted to drugs or alcohol, all we can think about is getting that next drink, getting that next pill, getting that next line, whatever that is, right? And we're not thinking about anything else in our life, so we are in complete self-destruction mode. And it's the same thing when you're addicted to a toxic relationship and a trauma bond. The next indication is that you've lost your identity. You become a shell of a person. Now, what happens here in these relationships is we begin to lose our identity. And a lot of times when we get into trauma bonds, we actually kind of had a loose self-identity already. We had already gone through probably many different toxic relationships. We really have never done the work to understand ourselves or understand what makes us tick. And once we got into that relationship, we were so codependent in it that we began to take on them as our identity, the relationship as our identity, right? And so that turns us into that shell of a person where we're also walking on eggshells to keep the other person happy in fear that they're going to leave us, right? But it's hard to have an identity when you're in an emotional blender, okay? When you're going up and down all the time at the changes and the mental, emotional changes of the other person, it's hard to have an identity because you're trying to change yourself, like to ship shape all the time to get that person to love you, right? And so in that process, we lose ourselves, we lose our identity, and there we are just hoping and praying that the relationship will work out. And one last thought that I want to leave you with is you don't have anything with potential, okay? When we have a relationship like this and we're going through this trauma bond and we're dealing with the idealization, devaluation, and discard, and we're constantly going through that over and over again, realizing that the idealization part of it is not real, realizing that it's all manipulation. And it's hard to do that. But we don't have anything with the potential of what we believe the person to be. And that's one of the biggest things in a trauma bond, is we see that person and we want to believe that they are how they are when we met them, right? And so we hold on to that idolization of that thought process of how they were in the very beginning in the idolization stage, right? But that stage is gone a long time ago. And now the idolization stage are smaller and shorter, right? And there's a longer distance between them because the devaluation and the discard phase last a lot longer now. And that's intentional too, right? Because you're starving to get back in the relationship, you'll do anything that you have to do to stay in it. In the next upcoming video, we're going to be talking about how you can deal with the trauma bond and how you can begin to overcome it. And this takes time, it takes effort, and it takes being mindful and understanding yourself. So we're really going to talk about that, get in the trenches with it, because many of you who are locked in a trauma bond right now can't see the forest through the trees, right? You can barely eat or take care of yourself when you're in the devaluation discard phase because you're trying to figure out how to get back in, okay? So we're going to be talking about that in the upcoming video and giving you that information so that you can begin to find your identity and leave this toxic relationship. I hope this video has helped you. Please share it with your family and friends. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me, and it shows me that you really like the content. And in the comment section below, if you can go on and let me know of some things that you've dealt with in a trauma bond. Is there some things that you've gone through that I didn't list out? Because I really think that everybody needs to have as much information as possible so that they can understand where they are and that this isn't true love. This is actually manipulation. And it's causing someone to lose their identity. And you know, this takes a village to help everybody, so I appreciate your feedback and your perspective. Don't forget to live your true life.